Heads are rolling once more in the Russian military. Infuriated over the constant and embarrassing failure that has been Russia's so-called special military operation in Ukraine, Putin has turned his sights towards his own warmongers. They failed him. Now, they're gone. In desperation, Putin is turning against his own generals in a purge that is proof that Russia's war in Ukraine is already lost. First under the figurative guillotine is Vice Admiral Sergei Pinchuk, who is the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Correction, was the commander. At least it appears that Pinchuk is about to be stripped of his position in the wake of his complete and utter failure to resurrect Russia's flagging fleet following 4 years of warfare that has rendered it functionally useless to Putin. The news of Pinchuk's pending departure comes from the pro-Ukrainian partisan group Artesh, which took to Telegram to announce what its agents had discovered. The Russian armed forces are preparing a replacement for the Black Sea Fleet commander due to defensive failures, Artesh declared, adding, Artesh agents within the fleet headquarters report that rumors are circulating among officers that the Russian military's top leadership is considering replacing the current Black Sea Fleet commander, Admiral Sergei Pinchuk. The reasons are systemic failures in ensuring the security of bases and ships, as well as the extremely low effectiveness of measures to counter Ukrainian unmanned boats, UABs. The same group says that though the firing of Pinchuk hasn't been made official yet, several high-ranking officials have arrived in Moscow from the Black Sea Fleet's current headquarters in Novorossiysk. That, Artesh claims, is a surefire sign that something huge is going down, as such visits are usually a sign that internal investigations are happening and personnel decisions are being made. The same group also says that Pinchuk's tenure as the Black Sea Fleet commander has been pockmarked by defensive failures. In the last 6 months alone, at least 8 successful attacks by Ukrainian unmanned naval vessels have been recorded against Black Sea Fleet facilities, including Sevastopol and bases in Crimea, Artesh says, in addition to pointing out that there were times when it took up to 40 minutes for on-duty forces to respond to these attacks. There you have it. It's not loose lips that sink ships. It's slow-moving troops that still, after 4 years of fighting, have no idea how to respond to Ukraine's asymmetric assaults on the Black Sea Fleet. But at least Pinchuk wasn't responsible for the deaths of untold thousands of Russian soldiers. That was the main achievement of the second man on the Kremlin chopping block, so keep watching to find out about him. Returning to Pinchuk's impending departure, most would assume that this was a long time coming. The Black Sea Fleet has been battered almost since the Ukraine war began, so surely the firing of its commander was overdue. And it was, the first time that Putin sacked the leader of the fleet. You see, Pinchuk is actually the third commander that the fleet has had during the war, as Putin and his Kremlin cronies have found themselves scrambling several times over to find somebody who can make Russia's warships viable again. Before Pinchuk, there was Igor Osipov. He was the man in charge of the Black Sea Fleet when Ukraine set out its ship-sinking stall back in April 2022. On the 14th of that month, Ukrainian Neptune missiles careened into the flagship cruiser of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva, sending it to a watery grave in an event that stands as the largest loss of a single warship since the Falklands War. Osipov didn't last much longer. By August 2022, Osipov was removed from his post in one of the most prominent dismissals of a military commander carried out by Russia since the start of Putin's invasion. The commander's inability to do anything to stop a July strike on the former Black Sea Fleet headquarters at Sevastopol didn't help his case, especially as the attack caused Russia to cancel events scheduled for its self-aggrandizing Navy Day in the region. Ukraine's increasing number of attacks on Crimea itself also counted against Osipov. It was no surprise then when he was taken out of the picture, but his replacement didn't fare much better. Viktor Sokolov took over at the helm of the Black Sea Fleet in Osipov's wake, and his tenure can be fairly described as an absolute disaster. In the nearly 2 years of his leadership, Ukraine destroyed many more of Russia's ships, placing the fleet in such a state of panic that it was forced to withdraw its ships as far away from Ukraine's missiles and drones as it could manage. Humiliation, once again, was all that Russia's new Black Sea Fleet commander delivered to Putin. Finally, in February 2024, the Moscow Times reported that pro-war Russian military bloggers were reporting that Sokolov had been fired. The news came in the wake of Ukraine taking out yet another of the Black Sea Fleet's warships. To add insult to injury, the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for Sokolov's arrest, essentially letting him know that any attempt that he made to leave Russia would be fraught with danger. Sokolov would have to stay in Russia, right under the watchful eye of a Kremlin that no longer trusted him, assuming Sokolov was even still alive at the time of his dismissal. Interestingly, September 2023 saw Ukraine claim that it had killed Sokolov, along with 33 other Russian officers in a missile attack. Russia instantly denied this, releasing video footage of Sokolov supposedly attending a video conference in which Putin was present. Sokolov had his head resting on a pillow during the conversation, and he never spoke a word. That's strange in its own right, and there's a small chance that his firing may have ended up being a way for Russia to cover up his death. We may never know for sure. But not much has been heard of Sokolov since. Regardless of what really happened to Sokolov, it was Pinchuk who took over his vacated post. And it's Pinchuk who's become the third victim of Putin's Black Sea Fleet culls. Frankly, it's starting to feel like it doesn't matter who Putin puts in charge next. The Black Sea Fleet is such a mess right now, all thanks to Ukraine, that it seems almost destined to be a non-entity for the rest of the war. That's basically what it has been since August 2024. By that point, Ukraine had already destroyed about a third of the fleet with its pinpoint missile and drone strikes, forcing a retreat from occupied Crimea that led to the UK's Ministry of Defence to declare the Black Sea Fleet as functionally inactive. Ukraine managed all of this while barely having a warship of its own to attack the once dreaded fleet. As Artesh pointed out in its Telegram post, Ukraine solved that problem by developing UAVs to conduct strikes in places where its missiles and aerial drones couldn't reach. By July of 2025, the Black Sea Fleet had almost disappeared from the very body of water that gave the fleet its name. Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty reported that though the threat of sea mines and Shahid drones was still very real for Ukrainian sailors operating in the Black Sea, Russia's once feared fleet was far less of an issue. As one Ukrainian officer named Ilya said at the time, "Thanks to our coastal forces and missile systems like the Neptune, the Ukrainian Navy has managed to push back the Russian Black Sea Fleet." Ilya also highlighted that the demise of the Black Sea Fleet as a naval threat also had ramifications for Ukrainian soldiers fighting Russian forces on the mainland. When the Russians saw that we could hit them with cruise missiles, they stopped trying to land troops or send ships close for reconnaissance. They realized we were ready to face off with them. It seems the only solid strategy that Pinchuk and the commanders before him ever came up with was to sail away in their massive ships. No wonder they've all been given the boot. Defense talks highlighted other problems that the Black Sea Fleet's withdrawal has caused for Russia. With the western part of the Black Sea essentially surrendered to Ukraine, Putin's enemy has been able to restart grain shipments to get some much-needed income pumping back into Ukraine's economy. Operational uselessness caused by a catalogue of failures has led to the culling of Black Sea Fleet commanders, but at least those commanders haven't been responsible for killing more Russians than Ukraine. But just before we go deeper into that, you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time if you want to keep seeing videos covering the latest Russian military failures. Back to the next neck on the Kremlin chopping block, and we're going to introduce him in a manner as ridiculous as the tactics that he came up with to tackle Ukraine's military. There once was a meat grinder man. Any worthwhile strategy he did ban. His career had seemed outstanding, but he couldn't stop himself from floundering. Now the meat grinder man is down the pan. That man is infamous senior Russian general Sukhrob Akhmedov, who experienced a meteoric rise through the ranks of the Russian military on the back of one tactic, trading the lives of his soldiers for territory. Akhmedov was a favorite of Putin's for a long time, the Kyiv Post reports, which suggests that Russia's president approved of the lives for territory trading. However, that sort of trade only works out when enough territory is captured to justify the bloodshed, and it's here where the downfall of Akhmedov has begun. The Kyiv Post says that several outlets have reported that the Kremlin has gotten rid of Akhmedov, who is a native of Dagestan who comes from a military family. The first hints of this removal appeared on January 13th, when a Russian military blogger named Devar Moyara, who the Kyiv Post says has ties to the Kremlin, reported that Akhmedov was gone. Russia's Astra agency and Ukrainian mainstream news outlet picked up on the story the following day, and though there has been no official confirmation from Russia of the firing of one of Putin's former favorites, the reality seems inevitable. Akhmedov is gone. And when you learn a little about his history in Ukraine, it becomes hard to see why he lasted so long. Akhmedov seems like the perfect choice for Russia prior to the Ukraine invasion. Having started his career in the mid-1990s, the senior general excelled as part of Russia's elite naval infantry marine units. Sure, he had no combat experience before the Ukraine war. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he hadn't served in Syria, instead focusing on commanding Russia's 155th Marine Infantry Brigade in Vladivostok between 2009 and either 2014 or 15. Oh, and doing his homework at Moscow's Frunze Academy, which primes promising officers for futures in Russia's top command. When Putin invaded Ukraine, Akhmedov was ready to shine. However, he started failing from the moment he set foot in Ukraine. He was deployed as the commander of a hand-picked team of Marines from his old brigade during Russia's initial attempt to overrun Kyiv and overthrow Ukraine's government. We know that the attempt failed. The massive war that followed proved that. But Akhmedov made himself stand out by ordering his forces to launch useless attacks against Ukraine's defenses in the village of Moshchun, which is north of Kyiv. Thus started a career of throwing bodies at defenses in the hope they would break through. In April, Akhmedov commanded a marine assault group fighting in eastern Donetsk. He was so unsuccessful in this endeavor that Marines from Russia's 155th Brigade sent an open letter to the governor of Sakhalin Island, accusing the commander of being tactically ignorant and wasting Marine lives on fruitless attacks. As a result of this carefully planned offensive by Big Boss commanders, we have lost about 300 men killed, wounded and missing in 4 days. 50% of our equipment. That's just our brigade. The district command, along with Akhmedov, is concealing this and using the official, falsified, loss figures for fear of responsibility, the letter stated in a tone dripping with sarcasm. How long will incompetence continue to plan military operations for the sake of their reports and awards at the cost of the lives of so many people? They don't care about anything. They just want to show off. For them, soldiers are nothing but meat. A damning indictment of Akhmedov's skills. But the man who had become the butcher of many of his own soldiers was just getting started. Akhmedov was promoted to the command of Russia's 20th Combined Arms Army in the December following the publishing of this letter. Failing upward is a very real thing. By 2023, Akhmedov was throwing soldiers under his command against the minefields, guided missiles and artillery fire that made up the defenses of the village of Vuhledar in Donetsk. It took months for this wannabe tactical genius to break that village, and yet more died. One period of fighting between February 9th and 10th, 2023, saw the forces under Akhmedov's command lose 300 soldiers, along with 31 tanks. Fast forward to 2024, and Akhmedov resigned his post in preparation for being assigned to oversee the ground and air forces assigned to take Kursk back from Ukraine. The body count rose once more. Though Akhmedov succeeded in reclaiming the 1,300 square kilometers or 502 square miles that Ukraine had taken in Kursk, the entire operation, starting from Ukraine's capture of the territory, cost Russia 80,000 soldiers, per the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky. Another deadly disaster for Akhmedov. But finally, an assignment in Dobropilya appears to have been the straw that broke Putin's back. RFU News chronicled Akhmedov's Dobropilya disaster in its report on the commander's firing. Akhmedov's goal with his Dobropilya offensive was to aid in the encircling of the city of Pokrovsk, which Russia has been trying to capture for almost 2 years. Infiltration groups achieved some shallow penetration, though Ukraine was often quick to reverse whatever minor gains these groups made. Even seeing that his tactic wasn't working, Akhmedov ordered his soldiers to cling to whatever footholds they had, even in the absence of logistics. The results were inevitable. Thousands died to Ukraine's drones and artillery, with any attempt Akhmedov made at consolidating Russia's meager gains often being thwarted by Ukraine using glide bombs and deep strikes against the Russian rear. Still, Akhmedov ordered more meat into the grinder. Mechanized assaults came next, with each wave being weaker than the one that came before. Ukraine's FPV drones made mincemeat out of everything that the Russian commander sent, reducing Russia's forces to using civilian cars and quad bikes in their mechanized attacks by late December. And when those armorless vehicles were gone, Akhmedov ordered soldiers to attack on foot, and according to RFU News, even on horseback. Again, failure. The final bite of the Dobropilya cherry came at the end of December, when Akhmedov sent 4 armored columns containing a total of 24 vehicles toward Ukraine's defenses. Those columns were spotted early and destroyed by Ukraine's drones before they could make a dent. Akhmedov's final tally for the Dobropilya offensive is the reason why he's gone. Almost 21,000 Russian soldiers dead in about 4 months. With the losses finally growing too large for Akhmedov or the Kremlin to conceal, and the commander's utter incompetence laid bare, there could only be one result. Akhmedov had to be fired. How could he not be? It's possible that his streak of failure cost Russia in the region of more than 100,000 of its soldiers. For some reason, Putin stayed loyal to Akhmedov. But that loyalty has been stretched too thin, and yet another shake-up has been made to the Russian military's high command. Assuming that the Kremlin ever officially confirms either of these firings, it will likely try to frame the narrative as a case of out with the dead wood and in with the new blood. But the reality is much different. What Putin's latest purges are doing, just like those that came before, is creating instability in Russia's military, at a time when organization and a sound strategy are what's needed. The constant firing of commanders is never good for a military. The Jamestown Foundation explained this in an article examining the effects of similar purges in China's People's Liberation Army. and its points carry over to the Russian military. Irregular leadership can create factional conflict, the think tank says, as power vacuums get created and political and military climbers do their best to crawl their way into new positions. Internal fragmentation results, and we've already seen signs of this starting in Russia. As Jason J. Smart wrote for the Kyiv Post in August, Putin's purging of Russia's military elite has only opened the door for Russia's FSB to carry out cash grabs while it consolidates its own power. Dressed up as anti-corruption raids, Smart says the FSB is making arrests, taking money, and making sure that people who are sympathetic to its needs are installed in positions of power. There's a new elite forming in Russia, and it doesn't consist of Putin's military men. Beyond this fragmentation, the purging of military commanders, especially when done as often as it has been by Putin during wartime, weakens military readiness. The Jamestown Foundation points to Joseph Stalin's Great Purge of the Soviet military in the 1930s as being one of the reasons why Russia struggled so much during the early stages of World War II. It also notes that some suggest that ongoing leadership shakeups in the US, often caused by changes in the administration, can impact military preparedness. Now, it's hard to see how Russia could do much worse than Akhmedov, for example. However, you could also argue that Akhmedov was just following Kremlin orders, but not gaining the ground that he needed to stay in his position. Whoever replaces him will likely still send men into the meat grinder. They'll just do it when in command of units that were already disorganized and are now falling apart under a lack of leadership. The same goes for the new commander of the Black Sea Fleet. They're just taking on a position where they're expected to solve a drone dilemma that has no solution. So all that will result is another shake-up that ruins the readiness of a fleet that is already struggling. As for Putin, he has to be wondering where he can turn next. The commanders and generals he trusted are all failing him. In his mind, he had to cut them loose. But finding people that he can trust is now harder than it was 4 years ago, which may force Putin to accept the truth from which he has hidden for so long. Russia has already lost the Ukraine war. It just doesn't know it. After all, how can the Russian military recover when its high command is being purged and it's being forced to use something so useless that it proves that the war is already over? Find out what that useless thing is in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more reports on the shambles that has become Russia's military. And thank you, as always, for watching.